Hello, everybody, and welcome to Environmental Science. My name is Bobby Gavlik, and today we are going to be talking about bees. Bees are one of nature's most important pollinators, so we are going to talk about them, sort of what they give us, what their role is. However, it's really important to understand the beginning of bees, um, you know, uh, on a developmental level. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the development of bees. So, um, bees are a social insect. They are laid by a queen, and they are laid in eggs. And those eggs, you can actually see. Hang on, let me get my pen here. You can see on this right-hand side, those are eggs in sealed cells. What will happen is the queen will lay those eggs, and the worker bees will bring them and store them in cells. And these bees develop very, very quickly. In about 3 to 4 days, they'll go ahead and hatch. And what will happen is they will then develop into larvae. And here you can actually see a really solid image of the development of these larvae. They start out looking almost like a croissant, and then they divot in to form the bee's abdomen, thorax, and head. Um, and what's interesting is all female bees start out the same. Um, they all start out defaulted as worker bees. Um, if the colony needs a new queen, like if their queen is getting old or the hive is very crowded and they're going to split, what will happen is the one of the bees is fed a higher amount of this royal jelly. What this royal jelly is it's a mixture of honey uh, and pheromones from the queen that result in one of these worker bees becoming a new queen. So really interesting stuff there. And then finally, the bee will emerge fully formed. And this process actually takes a different amount of time depending on the type of bee. So there are three major roles in the colony. There's the queen bee, and they develop very quickly. They develop in about 15 to 16 days. After that, we have worker bees, which are the majority of the bees in the colony, and they take about 21 days. And then last but not least are the drones. Drones are interesting. Drones are the only male bees in the colony, and their job is solely to mate with the female, or with the queen bee rather. And they take the longest amount of time. They take 24 days. And the reason for that we'll actually see in a little bit in the differences in these bees. So, on the left-hand side here, we have a worker bee. This is what you're usually going to see out and about. And these worker bees are the smallest of the three. Things to note are very proportional sized wings to body. So let's see. Here's the wing and the entire body. These wings are designed to carry these bees a long way. Next, we'll go ahead and look at this bee in the middle. This is a drone. Now these drones are significantly bigger than the worker bees. Their wings are, you can't really see it here, but they are less formed because they don't have to do a whole lot of flying around. They have bigger eyes. They do not have stingers. And the reason is because they're always in the hive. And like I said before, their job is strictly to mate with the queen. Again, kind of interesting is they take the longest amount of time to develop. And as you can see, they are way bigger, they're wider than these other bees. So they have more to them. They take longer to develop. Finally, over here we have the queen. Now, a queen bee is in charge of the colony. Again, they have shorter wings. Their wings are still functional. They are just less functional than that of a worker bee. And the one thing that a lot of people notice right away is this thorax. Now that is a huge thorax. That thorax is going to be full of eggs. She's going to be producing eggs her entire life. She does in fact have a stinger, or a sting rather. It's smaller than that of a worker bee. It also doesn't have that barb in it. So a queen bee can sting you multiple times and it won't kill her. But most of the time she's using that stinger to defend herself against other queens. A little point of interest is this white spot up here. You could worry that that's a fungus or something. It is not a fungus. Basically what that is a bee marker. What that means is that people who keep bees usually mark their queen with a special kind of marker so that you are able to find the queen very, very easily when you're checking on your hive. Kind of an interesting thing about bees is, as you can see, the queen and the drone are considerably larger than the worker. That allows beekeepers to put in a device called a queen excluder. Basically what that queen excluder is it's like a piece of mesh that's big enough that the worker bees can fit through, but the drones and the queen cannot. And what that'll do is that'll separate the hive so that the queen and her brood are producing eggs on the bottom, and then you can have worker bees producing honey in the top layers. Again, really interesting stuff. So what do bees produce? Bees actually produce a number of different things. First is propolis. All right, now propolis is known as bee glue, and basically what it is it's made with saliva, beeswax, and sap from trees. And this is what bees use to really hold their colony together. If you ever seen somebody pull a part of a bee's hive out, it sticks in there pretty strongly to the point that you actually need to use a special tool to remove the frame, and that is because of this propolis. And propolis is actually used by humans as well in holistic medicine. People feel that it has health benefits, and yeah, it comes in a jar. Bees actually are able to secrete it as almost like a liquid, and it will seal, or it'll seal, resulting in, like I said, bee glue. Next thing that bees can produce is beeswax. All right, beeswax is actually like their main building material. This is what they build their cells out of. This is what they build the majority of their hive out of. So what will happen is bees will produce it by these wax glands here, and then they'll use their back legs area right over here. It's called a wax scaler, or a wax comb rather. And what will happen is it'll turn that wax into wax scales, which are these really thin, very flat pieces of wax, and they'll use that to create these cells. Next, we have honey. Honey is the one that most people are familiar with. Honey is not bee vomit. All right, gonna get that out there real quick. When a bee pulls nectar in, it will actually bring that nectar down to what's called a honey stomach, not connected to the normal stomach. And what will happen is in that stomach, the nectar will mix with some enzymes, and the bee will regurgitate it into the cells. And then over time, that liquid will begin to evaporate water, and the bees will actually end up pulling water off of it to make it more stable, and the result is honey. Now, honey is actually really interesting. It's packed full of nutrients, especially for bees. It's packed full of sugars as well, and it has natural antibiotic capabilities. Another interesting thing about honey is if you suffer from seasonal allergies, if you take locally sourced honey, you can actually begin to reduce how poorly those allergies affect you. The final thing that bees produce is called bee bread. Now, bee bread is this paste of pollen and honey, and it's fermented in the cells of the hive. And basically what will happen is the bees can use this as a source of carbohydrates and sugar, especially during the fall and winter months. Recently, it's been health food has looked at it as what's called a superfood. Basically, the idea that honey has nutrients and pollen has some nutrients, but by combining them together, we get this thing that's greater than the sum of its parts. So, bee bread. And bees are important to us, not just if you like honey in your coffee or honey in your tea, rather, but they are important pollinators, not only for flowers and things like that, but one of the big uses is for fruits and vegetables. In order for fruits and vegetables to grow to their top potential, the plant needs to be pollinated, meaning that pollen needs to be taken from one plant to another plant. And basically, what that's doing is it's creating stronger genetics for the plant overall, and giving you a stronger plant and better fruit. So bees in general are very important. Right now, they are actually struggling with a number of issues. These issues range from various bee diseases, such as European brood rot, to hive mites, which are these little bugs that'll suck the blood from bees, to bears, to problems that are currently, still being researched by science, things like colony collapse disorder. So bees are important. It's important for us to try and support them, and that is bees in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this little PowerPoint, and I will see you next